Gary, let's take a moment and say thank you to our sponsors at Fuji Sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've been working with us for a very long time, not only on this podcast, but also at the Academy. And I'm taking a peek at their website right now, and they have a brand new ultra light gi. Now, this is mind-blowing. I'm looking at my size. A2 is 2.75 pounds. I mean, that's under 3 pounds. That's mind-blowing.
I could even lift that. And go to their website, fujisports.com. Check it out. Anything you could need for your jiu-jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Hey, it's been a while since we started RŌL TV project.
It's been a while since you started it. I did come in later, and I can't say enough about it, especially the new platform. It's really amazing, fully customizable, and you know a little bit more about the structure.
Well, so two things you need to know. One is the subscription service, which is $9 a month. You can get access to hundreds of videos, hundreds of drills, techniques, and so on in a very nice library categorized as you need them. But two, different lessons. You can actually purchase those individually and you own them. So the subscription is not tied to it at all. You can look at things like spider guard, half guard sweeps, half guard chokes, folding pass, and so on. There's so many of them out there. So take a look and see where you need help with the videos, right? 30% if you type in RŌL Radio as a code.
Who doesn't like saving money? Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please remember to hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. Luca Atalla might not be a household name in the jiu-jitsu world, but he has been on the forefront of spreading jiu-jitsu across the globe since the mid-1990s. Luca was editor of Journal Gracie, which later became Gracie Mag, and was one of the men behind Galler, the popular and influential Renzo Gracie online platform. Here's the RŌL Radio with writer, journalist, and Carlos Gracie Jr. black belt, Luca Atalla.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we're live. One of the things you notice again that Gary was not able to make it today, which is fine. He had some family stuff, some important family stuff going on. So, but I'm glad that we are here. I'm glad you guys are with us, and we have fabulous guest, Professor Luca in the house. How are you, sir? Glad you joining us today.
I'm great. Yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm good to hang out with you. Listen, as I was getting ready for this conversation, one of the first things that comes up when you Google your name is a picture of you and Helio Gracie. And have you seen that picture? You know what I'm talking about when you're choking Helio Gracie?
For sure. This is a very dear picture to me. Every time, I'm with Master Rickson, he says, "Oh man, this is the best picture of my dad I can see. I wish I had one of, a picture similar with him." So yeah, I'm very familiar. I actually use this picture as my avatar in so many different WhatsApp and Instagram and whatever, whatever I remember to change the avatar, I put this picture. To me, it's a very important picture,
When was this picture taken?
That was probably 1998. Back then.
Was it back in Brazil?
Back in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, I was a purple belt back then. And I used to pay frequent, sometimes weekly visits to Grandmaster Helio Gracie. We became friends. It all started actually when, this is a funny story. One day, the phone rings at Gracie Mag, very little office we had. And, the other side comes a voice, old man voice, and say, "Oh, I want to speak to redactor Luca Atalla." And redactor I think that's the translation. Redactor was a very old journalist role, right? Redactor, kind of an editor, but a guy who fixes the writing and and also edit it. So it was like this term use it, and I said, this is Luca speaking, and he said, I want to invite you for a press conference I'm going to give tomorrow at my son's Roller Academy in Gracie Mag. And, you see what's going on when you get there. And then I went there, of course, it was an invitation for Master Helio Gracie. I never had any close contact with him before. That was beginning of 1998, I guess, even though I was at Gracie Mag for a while now. I started 1994 as a Journal Gracie. In 1996, the journal became a magazine, but, so far, no Helio Gracie interviews or anything. And when I got there, the press conference wasn't actually a Q&A. He just gave all the journalists a letter to be published, right? Or whatever is the media they represent. And the letter was actually a very tough letter of him being upset with a particular article on a big newspaper in Brazil, Jornal do Brasil, that pictured his nephew Helio coming back to Rio de Janeiro and putting Jiu Jitsu back on its place. And he got very insulted by the piece because he wasn't Rio. He didn't leave Rio, so he was like, how Jiu Jitsu is back in place if I'm here? And it was a misunderstanding, of course. It wasn't anything that Helio did. Helio used to live in Florianópolis in South Brazil, and he moved to Rio de Janeiro. And and he had acquaintance in Jornal do Brasil, and Jornal do Brasil, profiled him in a very good way. But Grandmaster Helio took this personally, and he was very upset, and he put a letter and kind of complaining about every nephew, every Carlos son. And Carlos was late at this point, right? Was passed away in 1994. So it was a few years afterwards. And I mean, Carlos wasn't alive, and he was like, upset with all the nephews. But, the magazine we published happened to be owned by one of his nephews, Carlos Jr. So I was in a spot that, he gave me a letter talking badly about all the nephews in a media that was owned by Carlos Jr. That was my situation. But then, when you get a letter from Grandmaster Helio Gracie, you publish the letter, you don't question it. So he wasn't expecting me to publish the letter, So we become friends at this moment. And the first article I did was about his late son, Halls Gracie. Yeah. I mean, it was a Carlos son, but he was grown by Helio. So, it was considered, Holly is considered he had two fathers, Carlos and Helio. And, I pay visits to him to write about Hollis Gracie first. And then we become friends, and I used to go every weekend, and at some point, almost every weekend. And there was a point that his grandson Hiro was there as a purple belt, spending 6 months with him, and Helio would invite me to train with Hiro. So I trained with Hiro a few times, and at this point I was a brown belt and Hiro was a purple belt. And so that's the history behind, the story behind my relationship with Grandmaster Helio Gracie. Right?
Let me ask you this. When he calls you, when you're at the Gracie magazine, and we'll talk about Gracie magazine later, but when he calls you and you pick up the phone and an old man voice on the other side, do you know who it is?
No, I had no clue, but he said, can I speak with the redactor, Luca Atalla? And I said, yes, it's Luca speaking. And I said, this is Grandmaster Helio Gracie here, and I want to invite you for a press conference tomorrow at my son's academy, Gracie Mag.
So what you think? What are you thinking about this? Because I'm like thinking right now. I'm like thinking if Helio would call me right now, like I wouldn't know what to say.
It's kind of the magazine was always, or especially in the very beginning, kind of fanzine, right? So it was something that it was not exactly journalism vehicle. It was something to promote Jiu-Jitsu, right? The idea behind the magazine was to have Jiu-Jitsu to have its own media, right? But I was a Jiu-Jitsu guy. My point is, when Grandmaster Helio Gracie called me, I wasn't thinking as an editor, as a journalist or anything. I was thinking about as a Jiu-Jitsu guy who was called by, Grandmaster Helio Gracie, which is like, the father of Jiu-Jitsu at this point, since Grandmaster Carlos was, passed away. But at the end, I had this Jiu-Jitsu attitude of, whatever it is, I'm ready, right? So I was back then a purple belt, but I was already, with this attitude of like, I can handle everything. I can handle anything, including, any possibility of Grandmaster Helio Gracie being upset with me. I would handle it, So that's the Jiu-Jitsu attitude that I try to pass to my students and try to pass to the kids, try to pass to anybody I have contact with, because it doesn't depend on your technical skills, your physical skills. It's just, an attitude, whatever it is, you are going to handle it, right? No matter what. And that was my thinking. I think I had a very solid foundation of Jiu-Jitsu at this point already, because I started Jiu-Jitsu in 1992. So this was 1997 or 1998, and I'm not precise. I can be precise if you give me some time to research. But, that was like I had 5 years of Jiu-Jitsu already. And, I'm not talking about occasional Jiu-Jitsu practicing. I'm talking about everyday Jiu-Jitsu practice. So I was breathing Jiu-Jitsu already, working with Carlos Jr. and publishing the magazine was part of my job. But, the other part of my life was being at the academy all the time and, listening the stories and training and being smashed. And I was smashed a lot because we used to train without time limits. So being, not a big guy, I was always competing at the lightweight division. As a blue belt and purple belt, I was one of the favorite partners of Carlos Jr. himself, and he loved to train, for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 1 hour. So when you're being smashed by someone much better than you 40 minutes, a call, regardless of being a call from Grandmaster Helio Gracie, is not a huge deal. You can't handle a call. You can handle a meeting, So that's the Jiu-Jitsu attitude that I believe it's more important than the Jiu-Jitsu techniques you learn.
Do you think the phone call? Do you think that
fine? Yeah.
Do you think the phone call really changed the way how your Jiu-Jitsu career from a writing perspective and then Jiu-Jitsu training really changed since you were able to hang out with Helio and many other people who were there, at the ranch? Do you think that changed the way how things went for you?
For sure. Thinking in retrospect, that was a life-changing call, but I didn't realize, especially, 97, 98, I was like 23, 24. So I had no clue what the importance of it. But right now, in retrospect, I can see there was a life-changing call because, the moment I became close to Grandmaster Helio Gracie, I put up a bridge between Carlos' sons and lineage with Helio sons and lineage. So everybody would respect me because I would go both sides, even though I have more contact with Carlos' side because of Carlos Jr., because of Renzo, because of the whole family. But I also, build, not that I built, but there was a bridge built between both sides of the family. And I was, very much, fine walking through this bridge over and over. At a certain point, I remember, and Hiro can confirm that, Grandmaster Helio came to me and said, Luca, why wouldn't bring Carlos Jr. here at the ranch with you? So it was his nephew, but he would ask me to bring as a guest his nephew. And many times, that's funny, because I got so much respect from him. In 2 occasions, he defended me against the whole family. One occasion was, I don't know what happened. We had 2 magazines being published every month, Gracie Mag and Knockout magazine. And at a certain time, Nino Chambry and Jorge Macaco went to shoot box in Curitiba to train. Back then when Vanderlei Silva was the Pride champion and these things. And one of our writers, and I was the editor, so he comes to me, and we honestly, until now, we don't know who inked that headline. We put a headline that was Jiu Jitsu surrender to shoot box. And that was a nightmare in my life, right away when we published that magazine, because, even though it was a knockout magazine, I was associated with Gracie magazine, a jiu-jitsu magazine, and people would come to me and say, well, how will you offend jiu-jitsu in such a way? And I don't know why we come up with that headline. But then Grandmaster Helio Gracie wrote a letter to me, which I have until today. They say, look, I know where you came from, and you are the only person on the whole planet authorized by me to publish a magazine named Gracie. So he wrote a letter defending me, for me to publish the letter against, all the family and all everybody who was upset with the headline, right? That's one of the things. And the other occasion was when on the 100th edition of Gracie Mag, I took the whole crew of Gracie Mag to the ranch to interview him. And I was more like a guest watching them interview the new guys, the new writers, the internship guy, asking questions. And one guy asked him, one of our reporters asked him, Grandmaster Helio Gracie, what is Gracie Mag for you? And then he looked to the guy and said, Gracie Mag to me? Gracie Mag to me is Luca. Luca is the Gracie Mag, So, it was such a blast to me to have the respect of Grandmaster Helio Gracie. I probably was respected by many other people in the family because they knew I had the respect of Grandmaster Helio Gracie. And I think, I always was fair and in terms of like the stories I published and everything. But the good thing, like you said, because of this meetings with Grandmaster Helio Gracie, I was able to learn a lot on and off the mats, because off the mats, with all his philosophy, I would spend the whole day, talking to him, and not necessarily on record. He was like talking, life lessons, and getting a life lesson of someone who is 90 years old and very well succeed in life, right? Successful in life. It's already a big thing, but, live and breathe Jiu-Jitsu and have philosophy lessons of Grandmaster Helio Gracie is huge. But I also learned a lot with him on the mat as well, right? I learned things that I teach my students today that it's very hidden in Jiu-Jitsu, it's very invisible, and it's very important, mindset and even technical things, the way to protect your neck, the way to protect your arm and those things. So I feel like indeed was a life-changing call. I had no idea, at the time it was just one more day at the office. And I was, the next day I had an assignment, which was, go to a press conference, and I had no clue what I would have from there. But I that day on the press conference, which didn't have any conference, was just the delivery of the letter, a copy of a letter for each reporter there. Yeah. And I came to him and asked him, you mind, I'm doing a research about RŌL Gracie, right? That's the guy here, this guy here, right? Yeah. And I want to put a lengthy profile of RŌL Gracie put together, and I ended interviewing over 50 people, and it was a very classic piece of Gracie Mag. It became famous, other more popular magazine, general magazine in Brazil, Trip, got, asked me permission to republish the article. So it was, a very important cornerstone of Gracie Mag, this article about RŌL Gracie, however you decide to pronounce. But I asked Master Helio if I could, interview him, and he said, of course, go there, interview, and come to my ranch, which was, give or take 90 minutes from Rio de Janeiro, 1 hour, 90 minutes from Rio de Janeiro, and the mountains, and a little mountains.
I can only imagine, like like I'm thinking myself, like here, a lot of people, I mean, everybody at this point, anybody who's starting, but anybody who's been doing jiu-jitsu for even 10 years or more, a lot of people dream about having opportunity to meet somebody like that. And you hang out with him and you write articles about him, you interview him. But there's, I'm sure, a lot of stories and a lot of information that you haven't published, a lot of stories and a lot of things that you learned from him that it's never been written anywhere. It's buried somewhere inside your head. I mean, that has to be amazing, isn't it?
Perhaps, but to be honest, Thomas, we had to publish one magazine about jiu-jitsu every single month, and at a certain point I was publishing 3, right? Because there was the English version, the Portuguese version, and there was knockout. So we have to squeeze the lemon. So whatever we had was a subject of an article. I try my best to put everything on the magazine. It was nothing comparable. I did different startups, different projects in my life. but nothing was comparable to have to publish a magazine with the small team we had. Man, we literally stayed sometimes a week without sleeping. But I'm not joking. It sounds impossible, but we have to meet deadlines. So we spend 3 people in a small office going over without any productivity because we were, that tired, and taking little naps when it was the case, but, sometimes 2 days, 3 days without a nap to meet the deadline. So I guess most things I published. Of course, the technical lessons I couldn't because you cannot translate to print papers, technical lessons in a very loyal way. But, most things. But one thing you're right, it was a privilege. And at the moment, I probably took for granted, because it was natural to me. But, nowadays I see this as, gold days that I had, so many opportunities, not only with him, to be honest, the moments I spend with Master Rickson also, and even Renzo, which is almost everyday's life, but, not many people, probably nobody except a few family members had the opportunity of spending so much time with Renzo as well. So, I'm blessed in this way, and I think I grasped a lot of their mindsets and philosophy and things like that,
Yeah, I was about to say, Helio probably is just the beginning of this long story that you have, long life story that you have. From Helio to Rickson, and then, Master Renzo and many others in between, right? There was probably hundreds of people that you've talked to that have made an impact, right?
Indeed. But Renzo, just to be clear, Renzo was the start point because my history with Jiu-Jitsu was trying to summarize. But, my older brother, right, who is, a pretty successful competitor and a good guy. He started before me, a few years before me. He moved to California. And, when I was in Rio de Janeiro, back in Rio de Janeiro, because I did my high school in campus, a place a little farther from Rio, which didn't have Jiu-Jitsu at the time. When I came back to start my college and engineering university, and my brother say, "Oh, you got to start training Jiu-Jitsu." I was 17, and I started training, for a couple months with Helio Moreira, Soneca. Mm-hmm. But I had to stop because I had a full-time job and the engineering university. So only on the next vacation I started Jiu-Jitsu again, and at the time Renzo had opened his own school in Ipanema, Brazil. And then my brother said, "No, now that you have time to come back, you go straight to Renzo." And then we became friends, even though I was 17, he was 23 or 18, and he's 24. We become big friends right away. And Renzo was the one who took me to Carlos Jr. I was a blue belt already to start Gracie Mag. So Renzo is really the start point of my Jiu-Jitsu journey. Technically, Helio Moreira, right? Helio Soneca. But, Soneca is a big friend until today. But, since it was just a couple of months, I would say Renzo, it's really the start point of my Jiu-Jitsu journey, So
how did you get into media? How did you get into writing? You mentioned 3 magazines right off the bat, but since then, you've done so much more. From video to photo content and so on. And many people don't even know your involvement behind the scenes to some of the content that's being produced everywhere. And to be honest with you, that this is essentially how we train Jiu-Jitsu. Everything is here on our phones, right? And so your contribution has been quite tremendous over last, several years. How did you get into this?
So the story is I was the computer guy, right? Because my high school, like I said, was in campus, and I studied. I would simplify to translate programming. You know, it was a computer high school, and I was programming during my high school, technical high school. And then when I got back to Rio de Janeiro, I started right away the computer engineering, university. So when I met Renzo, I was the computer guy. But for the layman, the computer guy is the guy who does everything, who fixes the computer, who write the programs, and even who's the user of editing apps. So that was 1994, and that was the beginning in Brazil of the popularization of programs like Photoshop, like on the time CorelDRAW, and like PageMaker. Those programs are really the pioneers in media editing, right? For you to design pages and layouts of a magazine, before that you had to do it manually. You had to do, we don't need to get there, but at this point we have software that you could insert an image and insert a text and put it together and compose it. And make the matrix to print it, right? So I was the computer guy. I worked at with the Navy to develop the system to automatize the guns and the sensors, radar. LiDAR or whatever, and Renzo, as a Renzo student, Carlos had the idea of putting together a journal to hand for free on the Jewish houses and to promote Jiu Jitsu. And Renzo comes to Carlos and said, "Oh, I have the perfect guy for it. A computer guy, but I had no clue how to write, how to take pictures, and how even to use PageMaker or CorelDRAW or, even Word. My thing was like, programming, so I wasn't writing text, it wasn't writing code, right? So I went there to see what was going on. And Carlos told me what he wanted to achieve. And he wanted to achieve was, he wanted a lesson, a class about these tools for him to put together the journal. And then I started doing a very crappy class because I didn't know the programs. How do I teach, Photoshop if I don't know how to use Photoshop? So I was putting together, and it probably was a very complicated Jiu-Jitsu class for Carlos. And Carlos came to me and started interviewing me for a job. And then he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, I code. What do you mean by coding? And then I explained to him, and I said, and what's your daily routine, routing. I said, I take a bus, I go to downtown, and then, I actually, my actual routing was even harder. I took a bus 6 a.m. and I go to university. And then I spend a few hours in university and I go downtown and I work for 8 hours and I go back to university. And then, I could only train during vacation because, when I finished university was 10 in the night. And I was the only student of my engineering class that had a full-time job, in a sense that, when I asked for a help or an exception of the teacher saying, man, I don't have much time for these assignments because I work full time, and the teacher would come back to me and say, why do you work? And I said, what do you mean? And I said, man, you pass to a university, a public university in Brazil, that you don't have to pay, so you're not supposed to work. So figure out. I don't care that you don't have time for assignment. So that was my routine. It was, I was 18, 19, and it doesn't matter too much. But, Carlos was seducing me and say, man, give up everything, become my partner. And we do I'm starting the federation, the Brazilian Federation. And then you're going to organize the tournaments, and we are going to do it together, and you're going to publish the newspaper, and you don't need to go downtown. You train here, you train at noontime, you come back to my home, and he literally had an office, a home office, back in the day. It was a one-bedroom house, and we had the magazine and the federation office in his living room. And then I said, you know what? That sounds much better for a 19-year-old, to train jiu-jitsu as much as I can and not to have, to worry about, a job in downtown and stuff like coding, which was my life from 14 to 18, 19. At this point, I was 20, actually, 1994. So, a lot of years coding, and and then I changed my life and I started writing for the newspaper and organizing the tournaments, the nationals and everything. And it was the seed of the IBJJF. Actually, the current CEO and part owner of IBJJF was my assistant.
Oh.
Marcelo, right? Marcelo Siri was my assistant in both the newspaper and the federation. But there was a time that, and that was after the World Championship, that I decided to focus on only one of the endeavors, So I came to Carlos and said, Carlos, I know that the federation is much more promising, but what I really like is the magazine. So, I don't want to work for the federation anymore, and I need to start meeting deadlines, and I will stop competing. And I mean, stop competing was 98, but it was kind of there that I decided to focus solely on the magazine. And then Carlos was a little upset because he needed someone at the federation. I said, okay, you take Marcelo, can go with you. And we were almost losing Marcelo anyways, because Marcelo, as my assistant, he couldn't earn enough money, and it was time for him to, he decided to go to Juiz de Fora to teach jiu-jitsu with my brother, who was with that academy, outside of Rio de Janeiro. So, we were going to lose Marcelo anyway. So at this point, Marcelo became the head of the federation, and I became the head of the magazine. The real head was Carlos Jr., but he would delegate the things to us.
It seems like your life unfolded in these different events, which really put you on this path that allow you to be creative, talk to all these people, interview, and really do what you love. Because you just a moment ago you talked about, federation, had more prognosis, being more successful. Perhaps there was more money associated with it, but yet you chose the more creative route. Was that in your mind as part of this entire time, that you want to be creative, that you want to, be involved in the magazine?
I just liked the magazine more for some reason. I just liked more the mission behind the magazine, which was, to promote jiu-jitsu and make it, I was really related to the mission given to me by Master Carlos Jr. of promoting jiu-jitsu. So that was probably the factor. I didn't care about money then. I don't care about money now. I was broke, Thomas. I was completely broke. Every money we would get from the sponsors, advertisers in this case, or even when it starts selling the magazine and newsstands, was to pay the structure and to pay the printing company. The printing company would, would get the biggest chunk of the money, and the others would be with the small team, sharing with the small team, and I would not take more than I needed to live, and that was for probably 15 years, and I didn't care. Success to me wasn't about money. It was about, was much more related with the challenge. And the challenge was such as, in the beginning, we'd never meet deadlines, right? But when I stopped competing and stopped working on the federation, and the federation I stopped working before I stopped competing, right? I competed mostly until 1998. 1996, in the first Worlds, I was the blue belt world champion. Then I got the purple belt, and I won a few Pan championships and a purple belt. And then I stopped competing. I actually competed 96, 97, 98. Yeah, 3 or 4 Pan Americans as a purple belt. Yeah, 98. So 96, 97, 98. 3 Pan Americans championship as a purple belt. And then I stopped competing because the problem of the competition, I had to focus on training and I would miss deadlines. But after I stopped competing, we never miss a deadline. And we start pushing further. How? We start acting as the magazine was a newspaper, a daily newspaper. How would it work? So the World Championship would finish on Sunday night, late night on Sunday. By Tuesday, the magazine was in my hands. So the amount of mess we had to move to accomplish it with the team we had and resources we have, it's something, unbelievable, because we had the same team doing everything. So we were tired after 4 days covering the the World Championship. But, in the end, a Sunday, we would go straight to the newsroom. We would spend the night choosing the pictures, and we had not digital cameras. So someone would rush to a lab to develop the films and would go back to the newsstand. Someone would be writing. The designer was waiting for the pictures for us to edit together in a light box, right? A huge light box that we put together ourselves. And we see the contact sheets, and then we would scan the films and put it together. Whatever we did, by 4 a.m., the magazine was ready. Then I had to get the media, which was small hard drives, zip files, or whatever, to take to a place to get the films. Then, I spent a couple hours waiting there, get the films, and board in a plane to São Paulo, because the printing company was in São Paulo, and the printing company was waiting for us. So they would put the magazine together, and I would, see if the colors were, good and everything was good with the printing. And then on Tuesday, at the printing company, they would handle the magazine to me ready, literally less than 48 hours after the final match on the World Championship. And I would take, a couple hundreds with me and take back to Rio to give, to put on the Bibisucos and other juices house and places that we manually handle to sell, just to make a scene because the newsstands would take a few more days to handle the distribution and to deliver. So that's the success to us was to have the magazine ready in our hands less than 48 hours after the final match. And we wouldn't, save any resources and money and energy to achieve this thing, and what's funny because we have a little competition back then in Brazil with Tatami magazine. So we have the Gracie Mag and Tatami magazine. Yeah, it was pretty much the same quality, to be honest. I would be biased to say the Gracie Mag was better, but they couldn't compare with us with deadlines. The magazine about the World Championship they publish would be 20, 30 days after, sometimes even more after the tournament. And we would have the magazine to show them 2 days after. And that was, for us young guys, with a lot of energy, the success. I wish I would be, more focused on other things, more important, but being frank, that was what matters to us, at this point.
I don't know. I mean, listen. As I'm listening to you, I mean, I think Gracie Magazine was one of the fundamental mediums that really distributed jiu-jitsu as it was. Like, I remember reading Gracie Magazine. Like, that was the only magazine that was available to me when I was a white belt. Way back in 2000. That work, even though it sounds crazy to everything that you're saying, the deadlines and the amount of time and effort that you guys are putting into this, in with the minimal return, I think really built the foundation to what jiu-jitsu is.
We would build a lot of enemies as well because, the team didn't care about teams, politics, or whatever. Carlos wasn't there, so he couldn't interfere. So it wasn't something very, very much. We would go as fair as we could go. Everybody is, of course, a subjective, right?
Yeah.
There is no objectives in journalism, but we would go as fair as we could go, and we would make both Gracie Barra guys and the other teams mad with us after, every single issue, it would just vary who, would be mad with us because, if someone thought he would be featured on the cover and he wouldn't, he would be upset. And, if you were on the cover that day, you would be stoked to be on the cover. But, then the next month you wouldn't be on the cover and you would be upset again. So it never was like easy for us. And people would, think that we were there with Carlos there saying, oh, do this, do that. It never happened. Well, our problem was the deadline, nothing else. We would matter about the deadline. And nothing else matter. We would completely focus on, we have to publish it, and it would go and publish it. And
I'm curious. I find it funny that the guys would get upset about not being on the front cover. Was there one particular one that like sticks in your mind that there was a lot of like getting upset over the being on the front cover?
A lot, almost every single issue. I don't see a particular thing because also we are kind of hostage. That's the name of the sales, right? Mm-hmm. Because otherwise we wouldn't print we wouldn't print the next issue, so we wouldn't have resource to print the next. Another thing to be clear. We never had any external money or investment at Gracie Mag, so it was completely bootstrapped, right? So we had literally to get the money from the newsstands to pay the printing company, who would give us 60 days to pay the certain print.
Yeah.
So we realized right away that, the only thing that would really generally sell would be to put the big names on the cover. So the big names, the sport was so little, the big names who would sell magazines were like Master Rickson Gracie, Vanderlei Silva, and a few others, and there was like a handful of people who would sell the magazine. So we would prioritize these guys and forget about justice for a moment, or fairness for a moment, because we need to pay the bills, right? Yeah. So,
well, if you didn't sell magazines, you didn't have money for the Max magazine, and that's where it would have ended very quickly. Yeah.
So people take for granted that there was a magazine featuring them all the time. The only exception we would do for this sales perspective would be the World Championship. That early days, we decided to feature always the absolute world champion, right? So there was kind of a tradition of the Gracie Mag that the world championship issue would feature the absolute champion, and there would, if we had any exception, was very few exceptions, that by the time, during the time I was in the magazine.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people upset. I don't remember, and honestly, a particular one. The biggest problem we had, I told you already, it was like a misunderstanding of the shoot the box thing. Yeah. And, we had a lot of problems with this. I still have, to be honest, that was in 2001, 2, and I still have people upset with me because of that headline, which I assure you wasn't inked by me, but as an editor and as a chief editor, it is more responsibility. I don't want to take off responsibility. I'm just telling you that we were so tired finishing the magazine that, it wasn't something that we think thoroughly and, decide to say jiu-jitsu wasn't and actually it was, I don't see the seriousness of this thing, because jiu-jitsu, it's much, I understand people get upset because jiu-jitsu is so big and so traditional that, it can put on this position. But at the same time, we were not comparing jiu-jitsu, a traditional martial arts, with an academy shoot the box. We was just saying that, at that moment, some jiu-jitsu guys, had to train striking to be successful in the MMA. And that was it, and I think people read too much to those headlines, right? But anyways, that was probably the biggest problem we had,
Well, we talked a lot about your creative side. We haven't talked anything about you on the mat. Now you have your academy, you have your students, you play a different role, inspiring and motivating people. When did this change, or has it changed? Like, at which point you become teacher, you start teaching and really become active in the front lines?
So it's all related, actually. It's funny because it's you sent me. I passed through my eyes on some previous questions before the podcast, and there was something about the passion about filming and photography, and I never had any passion about filming and photography. My passion is for the game, the entrepreneurship thing of having a project and succeed on whatever. It can be minimal thing of meeting a deadline, and then I had this obsession about it, and very few resources. And maybe if I took more time thinking about how to gather resources rather than achieving some goals, reaching some goals, we would have a different story. But the point is, I had to publish a magazine, and I didn't know how to write, and I had no resource to hire, so I had to learn how to write. And then eventually I became journalist. I went to university, and I got a bachelor degree in communication and journalism, because I felt was a need of the project. But it's not that I love to write and I love to report. It's the opposite. I'm pretty mad about journalists. I feel like they are, I don't want to generalize, but I feel they are a huge problem in our society. The way they rush for news, and they publish biased things, or, and things that, it doesn't help society at all. I have my beefs with journalism, but I'm a journalist. And, photography was even further, because even more strange, because, it's first I developed a very functional skill in photography, which was how to take good pictures of a fight, which is a very small part of photography, right? So you need to be opportunist. You need to have your eyes on the camera and have, a basic notion of lighting and, and focus and those things, of course, and especially with the filming, right? Because you wouldn't see the result right away. So if you don't know anything about lighting, you would, go all the way to Japan and take pictures of a pride fight and have all black, So I had to learn just enough to be accurate on, that specific moment. That was, ringside taking pictures of a fight. And the only reason I developed this thing is there was a need of the company. Otherwise, we wouldn't have pictures. So, I had to develop these skills. And then, it went all the way to 2013, when I retired at Gracie Mag. I semi-retired. I overview things, and I get back for a brief moment in 2016 to wrap things up and the operation here in the USA. But, in 2013, I was invited to launch a startup in Brazil, which was a copycat of Shutterstock. The name was Crayon Stock. And our biggest problem in the beginning was, the biggest pain was, Shutterstock had at the time 18 million pictures, and we had 0. So, I had to gather pictures, finding photography, subsidize one side of the marketplace, right? Which is like, the supplier, and then I had to take pictures, because there was like very much needed pictures that I wouldn't find any photographer willing to put on our platform. So I would, I took pictures, and then I learned how to take pictures, and then I learned photography, I guess, in a more general way, because I took pictures on every possible things you may think, and need to be quality pictures, otherwise nobody would buy. So I would, as you well know, and everybody well know, one of the most expensive parts of a wedding is photography. So I would just, volunteer my friend's wedding. Do you want a free photographer? I would, but it would allow me to sell the pictures on the platform, and they would, okay, no brainer, go ahead. And then I would do every single type of picture. I'm just giving an example, wedding, but it could be, with my partner, we flew over Rio de Janeiro for 50 hours through 2 years, 1 year and a half. And we published a book, The Real Scene from Above, you know, and a helicopter, wasn't drone at all, you know, it wasn't a helicopter. And we took pictures of everything because an aerial picture is very valued in a platform. So I had to do this type of picture. I had to do pictures, produced pictures of, like, you know, in a bar, in a nightclub, any possible situations. And our the way we distinguish ourselves was, you know, Brazilian pictures. The platform was launched in Brazil, so we had to have Brazilians on the thing. So black people and you know, white people and Lebanese and everybody, you know, very diverse, which, you know, people wouldn't find in foreigners. Similar platforms like Shutterstock. So we would make a distinction with our type of pictures, and I had to do the pictures myself, right? So it was this way that I became a decent photographer. You know, it wasn't about passion. It was a need of the company again, right? So, and you asked me about the mat. When I, you know, of course, when I was young and competing as a blue belt and purple belt, you know, I didn't want to lose matches, and I became a very decent competitor, you know, on my level. And of course, you cannot compare nowadays, because in 1996, as a blue belt world champion, I was hosted in nightclubs as a world champion. You know, it was a big deal to be a blue belt world champion, to be honest, in Rio de Janeiro, because Jiu-Jitsu was so small. There were not enough black belts. So we kind of got this fame just because of, you know, there was no much, right? Not many black belts for them to celebrate, and they were like married, and, you know, they were not, you know, active in a nightlife like we were. So we had a pretty good life in Rio as lower belt champions. We were very well recognized. But like I said, I stopped competing in 1998. It doesn't mean I stopped working in Jiu-Jitsu, right? I was, you know, my level lower naturally, because, you know, when you're not competing, you're not getting as good as the guys like who are having goals of like competition and everything. But I was there, you know, and I was like, you know, working in the magazine and like seeing what people do, and then training with the mats and everything. And then, you know, Carlos Jr. went to the United States in 2003 or 4 and had nobody to teach at Gracie Mag Academy. So I spent a year teaching there. And there was early days, you know, 2002, I guess, because I started there as a brown belt. And then 2003, I was a black belt and still teaching there. And then I stopped teaching again because they had now, you know, professional teachers teaching. And then I moved to the United States because of the magazine, because the magazine was becoming big in the United States. And then I was living next to Renzo. Renzo opened Renzo Gracie in Homedale, New Jersey. And Hollis and me, we were the main teachers there. So, you know, I had to teach, and I like to do things well. So the first thing I did was, Hollis, we got to have a curriculum, you know. So, and they said, yes, you know, I agree. And how we are going to do that? Oh, man, I have a great memory. You know, I know probably every single technique Renzo taught me as a white belt. So I put together a list of techniques, and that became the beginning, the skeleton of our curriculum. That was in 2009. And he developed the curriculum by himself afterwards in his way, and I did my way because, you know, in 2011, I moved to California, and we get, you know, different paths. But I taught for a couple of years in Renzo Gracie home, and there was the seed of Luca the teacher,
Do you
But then,
do you think all these skills that you got from the magazine, the photos that you had to take, you didn't necessarily like, writing and all these things that you learned, do you think that translated in some way for you to be a good instructor on the mat?
I believe so. It's not only I think the pictures are the least, to be honest, but I think writing is very important, because I have a theory that a jiu-jitsu class must be entertaining. Mm-hmm. And to entertain a group, you have to be a good storyteller, right? So if you're not a good storyteller, it's hard, just with techniques to keep a group of students together. Jiu-jitsu can be very demanding. It can be, but if it's fun, if it's entertaining. So I think I learned by observing that one of Master Renzo's main skills, don't get me wrong, he's as good as you can get as a jiu-jitsu technician, but he is an even better storyteller.
Yeah.
And I'm a pretty decent storyteller as well. So, I think this is something that helps. And this is something hidden and not taught, because to teach a class, just the techniques, like I said, it's not enough. Of course, there are more stuff that, learn with, visiting academies, seeing different styles, seeing where the pain was in different academies, as a business, and, putting this together. And like I said, success is something really hard to measure, right? Success to me when I was 24 was to meet a deadline. Success to me, was before the pandemic. We had 11 months, the Renzo Gracie Upper West Side, and over 400 active students without any previous promotion. And then you may attribute things, like, oh, okay, it carries Renzo's name. Well, there are like, 100 academies in the world with Renzo's names. But Renzo is partner. Renzo is my partner. It's not, Renzo Gracie Upper West Side, just to be clear, is not an affiliated school. It's his school. His equity in the business is is equal as mine, right? So, and then you say, oh, but he's your partner though, so that's the reason. And then I say, how many classes Renzo taught, and I'm talking about since we opened in 2019, and today he taught 2 classes there. So it's not really because of Renzo's presence there as well. I wouldn't say. But then you can start like talking about the spot you are located. It's really good. Yes, it's really good. So it's everything together. But I believe a small part of the success is the way we teach the classes at the Upper West Side, and I feel like it's related to storytelling, and I don't feel it's something that you get everywhere, to be honest. I may be wrong, but as far as my visiting in other place, and the reason I have the resource, and I'm not the only teacher, right? So it's not because of that, because but I was in the first year, I would teach 8, 12 classes a day. Nowadays I teach 1 or 2. So it's right now it's not the reason, but I believe the first year was part of the reason.
But you bring up something. You bring up something important, because whoever teaches the classes, whoever is the instructor, whoever's the staff, they create a dynamic in the school, and that dynamic turns into a culture, and that culture is why people are there, or why people sign up. That's really important, right? And you're talking about the storytelling. As instructors, we are almost as entertainers. Like if. You could be in my eyes at least, and you have by far more experience than I do, but you could be the best out of the best out of the best. And if you teach a boring jiu-jitsu, nobody's going to come.
On point. To me, it's so demanding. That's why I don't teach many classes a day. I love to teach that, I compare to a Broadway show. Each class I do, I'm presenting on Broadway. I have the obligation to make everyone entertained and happy on that class, plus teach them Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. And it happens that, I know a lot of Jiu-Jitsu as well, in terms of knowledge accumulated with, it's so many sessions with Renzo and Rickson and two different mindsets, so, just to be technical speaking, Renzo is more about tightness. So everything he does is tight. Rickson, it's about heaviness, Everything he does, it's with weight distribution. And you cannot see complete distinguished styles like both of them. And I have, a pretty deep, contact and understanding of both of them. Just to give an example, for Renzo, it's a kind of a big deal if you are on side control and you extend your legs, because several reasons, but one of them, you lose tightness. Mm-hmm. And Rickson's approach on side control is with the legs extended all the time, mostly, most of the time. So, how do you deal with that without an open mind, seeing both of them saying that, that approach is wrong, right? without knowing they are interfering on each other, but just saying, if you retreat your legs, you are light. Yeah, but you're tight, right? And if you extend your legs in the proper way, of course, you are driving all your body weight towards the chest. And that's how Rickson approaches. So it's crazy, to get, I'm privileged to have contact of these two things. But of course, this is not what distinguishes Renzo Gracie Upper West Side, because you have, great competitors, great jiu-jitsu technicians everywhere. There's another thing, and it's like, it's on the more on the subject of like those things that you keep like hearing, and it becomes true, but I'm completely against, and then some people will watch this podcast and they will say I'm crazy, and everybody says I'm crazy, and I talk to many people, and the other day I had a long conversation with Fabio Gurgel, who teaches people how to teach, and he said I'm crazy, but I'm completely against the organizing the classes in the beginners and advanced. So, I may be the only big academy in the world that doesn't do this. So Jiu-Jitsu to me is Jiu-Jitsu. And there is no such a thing as beginner Jiu-Jitsu, advanced Jiu-Jitsu. The thing is, if I teach a move, Thomas, as an advanced and sophisticated student, you will grasp a lot of these moves that I teach. If I teach a guy starting today, he will grasp very little, but the move will be the same. And I think it's the opposite. When you organize and spread the class and separate the classes, what you're preventing is the very same experience that you're telling me was a privilege. Because, I was a white belt, and I have the experience of like training with Soca, with Gordo, with Renzo, with Soneca, with everybody at Gracie Mag. There was no division. So why is it important to divide? Oh, because, the beginners cannot get hurt. This is a different thing. Actually, you increase the possibility of the beginners get hurt drilling when you put a beginner against another beginner. You increase a lot this possibility, even drilling, right? I'm not talking about sparring yet. But, so my experience is if I have someone to guide the beginner, you minimize the chances of him getting hurt, and you minimize the chance of him getting frustrated because you have a senior guy teaching him. So to me, it's the biggest absurd of the jiu-jitsu methodology, I ask for forgiveness of, some masters and everything, but that was a thing that I put on Renzo Gracie Upper West Side. So with that, we have a few weekdays, we have 7-8 jiu-jitsu classes in the day. So I increase the availability of the classes because if I have two classes together, I decrease the necessity of like a lot of staff members at the same time at the academy. So to me, it's a complete lack of first principle thinking to separate and organize beginners and advanced. And I know a lot of people will tell I'm crazy, and then they say, "Oh, but nobody does that." Analogy is not first principle thinking, right? Analogy, it's good for quick comparisons, but first principle thinking is going to the root of the problem. And I feel like when you go to the root of the problem, you need to ask, what do you want to achieve separating beginners from advanced? And you come with the reasons. And there will be a few reasons. And then you come to the reasons of not to separate. And then you compare those reasons. And I don't care who is doing different. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter at all. I compare the reasoning, and if at some point, and I have an open mind, I feel these reasons here, there will be a trade-off. But if I compare, if the reasons here are larger and more important than the others, I will switch. I switch to beginners and advanced. But right now, I have an environment that everybody helps each other. Even on the training sessions, I only allow the beginners to train. If they really want, they can, but they need a sponsor. Who is a sponsor? It's someone who is a high rank that is willing to skip around against a tough guy to sponsor them on their round. And I figured that's really that's very much what the high rank needs, because it doesn't make any sense for him to train all the rounds against a tough guy unless he's like preparing himself to a competition. So he gets better helping a beginner, and the beginner has I decrease. I'm not saying there's zero chance he's going to get hurt, but I decrease a lot the chance of him getting hurt, getting frustrated, and he feel good because no other place in the world probably he would have experience on his first day a session with a brown belt, a black belt, or whatever. So this is like, some people will listen to the podcast, and I'm sure they will say, "Oh, Luca is crazy." But Luca is crazy, but he has a very new academy which now has over 500 members. So, and this is the system, and everybody. So what I do is I squeeze the technical session in the first 40 minutes, 30 minutes, and then the sparring session with the specific and partial training and the regular rounds afterwards. And then I tell the beginners they are eligible to go, but it's not a given. They need a sponsor. So they will probably skip some rounds in every session until they get to a point they don't need a sponsor anymore. And it's up to the higher rank if he's going to sponsor someone. He's not enforced to do, but 90% of my blue, purple, brown, and black belts, they do, because, a lot of rounds, why not to spend a round teaching someone
and help somebody,
new, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. I agree. It's such a unique way of looking at this, but clearly is very successful way, at least in your academy, and that's what creates that culture that we talked about earlier. I don't know if you noticed, but we've been at this for over an hour.
Shit, yeah. Also, yeah.
Before we wrap this up, one of the things that we do at the end of every episode is a guest who was sitting in your seat in the previous episode. They asked a question and they didn't know that you're going to be answering this question. So Daniel from previous episode asked this question. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this. What's your answer? But if you had to choose, would you rather have the most technically sound jiu-jitsu, but 0 medals or titles, or have the ugliest jiu-jitsu in the world and all the trophies, all the gold medals that you can have?
That's a simple one. Maybe it would be hard for you if you ask someone very accomplished with a lot of medals and everything, and they may feel they are on the second part of the question, the letter B. But the technical aspect is so much more important because the sport part of jiu-jitsu, regardless of how good you are and how addicted you are to the sport part, is just a part of the jiu-jitsu. And as an active competitor, it only takes, give or take, less than 10 years, right, of your life, right? But you have to teach. And you get a guy like Walid Ismail, for instance, who was a tough guy back in the days. But, who's going to have classes with Walid? I'm giving you an example because it's hard to find someone that is very accomplished today that is not also very technical. So, if you tell me that Nicolas Meregali don't have both, you'll be lying, right? He had both, he's accomplished everywhere, and most than everybody everywhere. But, if I have to choose, the technique, because the technique, you make me multiply jiu-jitsu, right? I'm able to teach other people jiu-jitsu, and that's part of my obligation, as a jiu-jitsu guy. So it's a very simple question. And I feel very few people would choose differently, I guess,
Thanks for the answer. I agree with you 100%, but it's always interesting to hear the answers between the different guests that we have. So I do appreciate this. Well, listen, like I said, we've been at this for a very long time at this point. Let's wrap this up. I want to do respect to your time, and I do appreciate you being here, and I wish you the best of the success with very fast-growing and successful academy and all the other projects that you're doing all around. And, going back, I do appreciate everything that you've done so far from the photos and from videos and Gracie Mag and all the other things that you have written for. So huge fundamental contribution to what jiu-jitsu is today. Where can people find you? If any listeners wants to connect with you, where anybody websites for your academy?
Yeah, actually, I'm pretty far away from social media, which I love Twitter, right? But as more as a consumer than a publisher nowadays. I don't like I have Instagram and a Facebook account, Luca Atalla, but I don't go there very often. I feel like very depressive Instagram nowadays. You feel everybody. If you are a jiu-jitsu teacher and you scroll through Instagram, you will feel that you don't know jiu-jitsu, and it's not true. It's you are accessing a very edited part of people's life that is very happy and very successful, and this is not real life. So I feel like I don't want to contribute to that, either publishing or scrolling and consuming. So I don't like Instagram too much, which is like the main jiu-jitsu social media platform, I would guess, right? But, the thing that where you find me is, every day at Renzo Gracie Upper West Side, and eventually at Renzo Gracie Wall Street. This is not many people know that. It's not a top secret that we are right now building one of the largest Renzo Gracies, ever. It will be Wall Street. So Renzo Gracie Wall Street will be another project that is like construction literally now, and it probably will open kind of January of 2023, and I hope it will be, as successful as the Upper West Side location. The Upper West Side is a very iconic location. If you came to New York City and visit the Dakota building, where they film forgot the name, the Baby of Rosemary, whatever, it's the building John Lennon was assassinated, right? Yeah. So it's, in the 72nd Street with Central Park. If you came further west, you're going to reach the Columbus Avenue, which is where we are located, right? So Renzo Gracie Upper West Side is 72nd Street with Columbus Avenue. And I thought you would ask me to ask a question to the next interview person.
that we're gonna do off air. Don't say that question now.
Okay, all right, yeah, that makes sense.
All right, Professor. Well, thanks for the last hour or so, more than an hour, almost an hour and a half of the conversation. I really did enjoy our chat and all the stories that you shared with us. And I'll be watching out for the Wall Street location of Renzo Gracie Academy. That's continuously growing, and I wish you the best of success with that.
Thank you very much. It's a long interview, but if you edit it and takes out of all of my and things that it doesn't make sense, it's going to be 40 minutes.
We love to have you there. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you around. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.